Here are the top 5 books I read in 2025 that helped me improve how I think and practice as a psychoanalyst in training, and that also gave me a deeper appreciation for what it means to be part of this long-standing, dense, very rich psychodynamic tradition. So depending on what you are curious about, what you hope to learn more about, whether you are also a psychodynamic psychotherapist in training or a psychoanalyst in training or not, maybe one of those will be interesting for you as well. In general, 2025 was a slow reading year for me, especially when it came to new books. For one, I developed the Karen Heuner workshop at the beginning of the year, all about the theory and the ideas of Karen Horney. So that already added about like a bit over 2,000 pages to my reading workload. Then there were just some personal things that happened last year. So I knew that I had to choose very carefully which books I read last year because I just didn't have that much capacity to read new books. And I really had to make sure that the ones that I read gave me the biggest bang for the buck, or the biggest bang for the page, however you would say that. And I'm very happy with especially those top 5 books that I read, because they really helped me to grow as a clinician, learn new interesting theories that I never heard about, and just make me feel more comfortable being part of this big tradition. I'm looking forward to sharing those with you. If you're on my newsletter, you will have heard of most of them, because I share reading updates over there and other interesting things I find, maybe like 1 or 2 times a month. I recommend signing up if that sounds interesting to you. But I also think, it can never hurt to hear about a good book twice. So this is what we're going to do today. The first book that made it into my top 5 is a book that you will have seen on my channel before if you've seen previous videos. But again, I think it never hurts to hear about a good book twice. And that is this one. Am I holding it correctly? Yes. Comprehensive Dictionary of Psychoanalysis by Salman Akhtar. It was published in 2018. In general, you will see that all those top 5 books are pretty recent. They have all been published in, I think, the 2000s. So this is the first, because many times, books are from either Freud from the 1920s or 1940s, 50s, 60s. But yeah, those top 5 books have been fairly recent regarding psychodynamic standards. This book it's a pretty big one, not just when it comes to pages. It has, I think, 420 pages, but also in size. Like, this is a standard sized Kindle. So you can see that it's pretty big. And the reason that it is so big is because Salman Akhtar took it upon himself to embark on the incredible journey of cataloging every psychodynamic term that is important, that exists, any sort of whimsical little thing that some psychoanalyst 20, 30, 40, 70 years ago defined, it's in there. Of course, not everything. For example, I looked up some of Karen Heuner's ideas. They were not in there. So of course, it's impossible to catalog everything. But Salman Akhtar managed to compile, I think, over 1,800 concepts, which is insane. And he traces those through what different thinkers thought about them. And if you ever wondered, well, what actually is the definition of transference? Or what actually is the definition of introjection? What exactly is primitive envy, or whatever you might want to learn about? Most likely it's in here, and you can get a very nice definition in just a couple of paragraphs, which is pretty insane. I made a video about this book where I just I opened some random pages and just studied whatever concept he introduced there and read the original literature. That was very fun for me as well. So if you want to really nerd out and you are already familiar with the tradition, so you're not completely disoriented, I think this is such a fun book to gain an appreciation of how complex, how dense. 1,800 concepts, and that's not even all of it. That is a pretty fascinating theory to be a part of, if you ask me. The next book that influenced how I think and practice as a psychoanalyst in training is this one, Psychodynamic Techniques by Karen Moroda. It was published, again, pretty new, in 2012. It has about 274 pages. And I have read my fair share of introductory texts that help to introduce someone to what it means to practice psychodynamically. There's brilliant books by Nancy McWilliams on that topic, by Alexandra Lemma. And like I always enjoyed them, of course. I mean, there is like seasoned psychoanalysts, seasoned psychotherapists on the other side of it who try to condense everything they learned about what it means to practice psychodynamically into, often like 200, 300 pages. But what I enjoyed so much about this one from Karen Moroda is that she manages to combine psychoanalysis with a fair share of pragmatism, which I personally really enjoy. Some of you will read this book and say, oh, she's not this enough, she's not that enough, I can't believe she does this or she said that. I personally really like it when psychotherapists bring their own personality, their own convictions into the therapy room with them. And I think Karen Moroda, of course, can also become very dogmatic and very rigid, but Karen Moroda just does it in such a beautiful way that I really enjoyed. One thing I enjoyed about this is that she puts a lot of emphasis on working with affect. So what is the dominant affect in the room? Whenever you don't know what is going on or what you should do, what is the dominant affect in the room? Another thing I really enjoyed that Karen Moroda did in this book was she explained her use of psychoeducation in the therapy. When I wrote about this on my newsletter that received kind of mixed responses, but I really like it. She explains that she uses psychoeducative elements in her therapy as well. For example, she would explain what it means to be in regression to her patients, or she explained free association and its place in the therapeutic relationship and the therapeutic practice. I really like it because I think the psychodynamic tradition and probably even more intensive psychoanalysis really clouds itself, or can cloud itself, in mystery, and we don't talk about this, or we use very complex language, or we just not share any of that information with patients. And of course, psychoeducation needs to be used in the proper context. It's good to be selective about this and so on. But I personally started using more psychoeducative elements. For example, explaining what regression is when I feel like a patient enters that state and feels very insecure about it. And I personally have seen good results. Of course, this is not something that you just use in every situation, because it can also just lead to intellectualizing instead of being there in the moment. But I have found that there is a nice place for psychoeducative elements in the therapy that I'm happy to use. And I'm very glad that Karen Moroda opened that door for me. Another small little sentence that made me chuckle because I could relate to it was Karen Moroda wrote, when a client looks at something in the office that has always been there and says, "Is that new?" it means that some changes has occurred internally. That's on page 85. And the reason I had to chuckle was that I still remember when I was in my first training psychotherapy, I probably had entered the same room about 50 times already, and suddenly I stepped in one of the couple last sessions and I said, "Oh, is this painting new?" And it was like this big, ginormous red painting that hung right over the couch. And my psychotherapist, my training psychotherapist at the time said, "Oh no, actually I've had this since I was a student." He was already in his late 60s, and it hung in every therapy room that I've ever practiced in so far. And I was like, I never noticed it before, even though it was this like huge, ginormous, big red painting. And this is why this sentence struck a chord, because by the time that I had wondered, is this huge, big red painting that always hung over this couch I've seen 50 times walking in, is this new? I knew that something had changed inside of me in those 50 sessions. And other than that, you can find just very interesting case studies. I adore the way Karen Moroda writes about herself, about her patients. I think she writes with an incredible level of honesty, also admitting her own mistakes, admitting her own learnings, taking you along as she had to painfully learn some lessons that hopefully, if we get to read this, we don't have to learn ourselves. And I adore her writing. I like her pragmatic approach to psychoanalysis and really recommend this book. In fact, I liked Karen Moroda that much that I read a second book of hers in the last year. And this was another book that was like a hell yes kind of book and one of my top 5 books of 2025. And it's this one. It's called The Analyst Vulnerability Impact on Theory and Practice, also by Karen Moroda. It's her newest book, I think. It was published in 2021, 226 pages. And this one, rather than being on the technique of psychotherapy or the theory of psychotherapy, it really is about how our psychology, the psychology of psychotherapists, the psychology of psychoanalysts, impacts the therapy that we are able to provide, especially what are the common shortcomings, the common problems that psychotherapists who are drawn to this profession because of different psychologies are likely to encounter, and what can we do about it? Actually, just recently, I read about a study that was shared on X or Twitter about the predominant personality styles in psychotherapists. And number one was the depressive personality, which is well known in the circle that many psychotherapists have depressive dynamics. And if you're curious about understanding personality styles, read Psychoanalytic Diagnosis by Nancy McWilliams. I mentioned this book a ton on this channel, so you will easily find my review and also the book if you like it. But the second most common personality style was the narcissistic personality style, which I thought was very interesting. Again, personality style doesn't mean personality disorder. We all have a personality. We don't all have a personality disorder. We all have depressive and narcissistic elements to our personality. So I think the whole topic of what does the psychotherapist bring into the psychotherapeutic relationship is a topic that has been severely underrated. Almost all the studies that you find are all about modalities. What performs better? Short-term psychodynamic, short-term CBT, short-term this, long-term that. But there is still the huge element of the person that provides his psychotherapy. And there's this huge unknown of what is the match between the psychotherapist and the patient. And I think Karen Moroda just does a great job at reintroducing this question of what actually is the impact of the psychology of the psychotherapist and what does it do with a psychotherapeutic relationship. She says, for example, the psychotherapist with depressive personality style, they really struggle with recognizing aggression, with bringing their own aggression into the psychotherapeutic relationship where it might be necessary. They really struggle handling conflict, engaging in conflict, which might be very necessary in one treatment or another. And she also talks about the narcissistic vulnerabilities that we might face as psychotherapists. So I highly recommend reading this book, especially if you are a psychotherapist in training and you're still in your own analysis, or you just want to better understand one, maybe why you chose this profession, but also what you should pay attention to, because it can impact and worsen the quality of therapy that you might be able to provide. So I really recommend this one. The next book that really impacted how I think and practice as a psychoanalyst in training, I don't have a physical copy, I only had a digital copy of that, is the Handbook of Dynamic Psychotherapy for Higher Level Personality Pathology That's a handful. And that was a joint effort by Eve Callagher, Otto Kernberg, and John Clarkin, was published in 2007, has 284 pages. And the quickest way to summarize this book is that it is TFP, so transference focused psychotherapy, for higher level personality pathology, so for neurotic patients. Otto Kernberg, who is still alive, a living legend, incredible theoretician, incredible clinician. His work, his body of work is insane. He developed TFP, so transference focused psychotherapy, for people within the borderline range. So, not to be confused with borderline personality disorder, which is included, but much broader, patients whose personality is organized on the borderline level. I have read the manual for TFP for borderline patients, and that has been very interesting, but I was always wondering, how would you actually apply that to people who are maybe, on the verge of being neurotically organized, or who are neurotically organized? Does this approach to therapy and this way of thinking hold value there? And this is where this book has been so helpful, because it's so difficult to manualize psychodynamic interventions. If it was clear and easy and there was just this one way of doing psychodynamic psychotherapy, there would just be one book. But no, there are thousands of books, even just probably thousands of introductory texts. So you can see, like, this gives you a taste of just how difficult it is to describe how to provide a certain intervention, or how to, manualize psychodynamic psychotherapy, which is also one of the reasons why psychodynamic psychotherapy is so behind in research. I mean, we've caught up a lot. There were a lot of amazing contributors to really put in the effort to make scientific studies, to make sure that they're happening and that they can validate what we knew clinically before. But yeah, I think this is why this handbook is such an incredible achievement, because it really tries to break down for beginners how to conduct TFP for people with a neurotic personality organization. I think especially if you are a beginner and you're just really grasping for guidance, this can be a helpful element to include in your reading, in your studying. I hope to one day train specifically in TFP, because I just really enjoy this approach and I really enjoy Otto Kernberg's theories, even though, of course, there's also things I don't like, and nuances and things where I add other points of view as well. But I really enjoy this. I think what they do for the treatment of personality disorders is incredible. The whole group surrounding Otto Kernberg, Frank Yeomans, John Clark and Eve Callagher, all of them, they just do incredible work for all of us as psychodynamic practitioners. So if you're curious about learning how to treat neurotic personalities, people who are organized on the neurotic level, this might be a very interesting book for you to get your hands on. It's very expensive though, so maybe see if you can get it through your library or a used copy from Amazon, etc. My favorite book of 2025 is a book that has captured me with its storytelling, and also, much like the dictionary that Salman Akhtar put together, it has given me such an appreciation of what it means to be part of the psychoanalytic, the psychodynamic tradition. And it is this one. You might have seen it before on my channel. It's called Revolution in Mind by George Macari. It's from 2008, so it's also pretty new given psychodynamic standards, and it's quite a big book. It has, 624 pages, but it's worth it. I can tell you those 624 pages, they fly by pretty fast because of Macari's incredible storytelling. This book will not teach you psychodynamic theory in and of itself. It will not teach you how to act as a psychodynamic psychotherapist in the consulting room. That's why I suggested some other books to you that will definitely help you with that. But this book really lays the groundwork of what this psychodynamic tradition is built upon and what it means to be a practitioner of this very, very much long-standing tradition. It is the oldest form of psychotherapy after all. And this book does not show, just the highlights. It's not a pure idealization of the field, even though you can tell that George Macari adores psychoanalysis and the entire field of it and the thinkers that are part of it. But it's a real raw document of how those early founders, because this book deals with the history of psychoanalysis all the way up to the end of the Second World War in 1945, it is a real raw account of what it meant to struggle with those concepts, to struggle with the interpersonal dynamics, to struggle to make sense of things that were so vague and so confusing and so multifaceted. And this is why I really love this book, because I think especially if you are a psychotherapist in training, or maybe also an early career psychotherapist, you often, at least that is me, I often have the feeling that other people just have it figured out. There are those geniuses, those seasoned psychotherapists, and they just know everything. And if only my patients could be in therapy with them, they would surely be doing better. And this book really gives you an appreciation for not having it all figured out, for being much more a person than an idealized genius. Because of course, I mean, for example, Freud, whether you like him or you don't like him, he was a genius. That is just, you can't read about him, you can't study him, you can't look at his life and say that he wasn't a genius. Whether you like what he contributed or not is a different question. But even he was struggling with those concepts. He revised his theories so many times. There were so many interpersonal conflicts in his life that George Macari writes about. And this just, it humanizes the field. And it is a great antidote to the imposter syndrome that pretty much every beginner psychotherapist has, because it points to this tradition that we are a part of. It was founded by people, some of them downright geniuses, no questions asked, but they were still, at the end of the day, humans who struggled with the human condition and tried to make sense of it. This is the footsteps that we step into. And, honestly, most of those people, probably all of them, are way smarter than I am, way more intelligent than all of us. But still, there were people. And they didn't have it figured out. It's a tradition that is based on experimentation, deep curiosity. And that is something I really needed to be reminded of, and something I really enjoy. Plus, I mean, I can only repeat myself here. The storytelling is gorgeous. It's also very affordable. I think it's not even $10 for the Kindle edition. So if you are a beginner psychotherapist and you would like to get a bit of a reality check that, yes, the founders of a tradition might have been geniuses, but they were still pretty much human after all, please get your hand on this book. So yeah, this concludes the top 5 books I read in 2025 that helped me improve how I think and act in the consulting room, and also about finding my place in and what it means to be part of this long-standing tradition. I hope you liked it. If you're curious to learn more about what I read, interesting little things I find, make sure you sign up to my newsletter. That's what I send out about once or twice a month with new curiosities. And until then, thank you so much for your attention. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye bye.